Hey everybody, my name is Daryl and this is Dion.
Hello!
And welcome to Where We Stand, a series where we talk about the games we've played recently and discuss how much we may or may not have enjoyed them. Today we're talking about Phantasy Star Online 2 New Genesis. Available on Xbox One, Series X and S, pick one, and PC. Now that we're queued up and ready to go, let's get started.
Let's talk about our experience with the series. I'll go first. So I'm a big fan of MMORPGs since playing WoW back in high school. And I am, MMOs and MMO lights, right? That's what we call them, or live service games. I've always been a fan of them. Recently it's been harder, but I always try to dabble into them and call out and see, what new games are coming out. And this one's no exception as we talk about PSO2. Very excited for it, and it continues in my line of playing MMO-like games.
And in my case, I enjoy MMOs overall. I'm not as deep into it as Dion, but I like my Final Fantasy 14, and I also like my MMORPG light games. So like Warframe, for example, I peek in whenever they have content. That's not a shot, I swear. Either way around, I really enjoy MMOs when the going gets good. From that point on, we could talk about the general overview of the story for Phantasy Star Online 2, which we did talk about briefly in our first impressions if you want to go check that out. But if not, it's kind of why you're here for the Where We Stand. You just want to get to the point. Dion, if you want to take that part away.
You play as Mirin, who has landed on the strange planet of Halpha. You team up with the ARC's operators on the planet to fight their biggest threat, the dolls. That's the whole premise. We'll talk quickly about our thoughts on the story. We're not really going to go through it fully, but it's a premise. It's forgettable in my opinion. Like the story is not there as the mainstay of the game. It's really just to guide you through the experience. And I think it's successful in making you just, get to the next battle points or getting to the next part. But it's not like gripping or anything like that. It's not a Final Fantasy 14 where the RPG is first. It's not that. It's definitely just a guide to get you through. I did like they add cutscenes. Then there are more cutscenes than the original PSO2 experience. That was good because I played the original PSO2 and I didn't enjoy that. There wasn't really cutscenes. There's like these weird, awkward talking moments that you see in old RPGs, which that game was an old RPG pretty much, yeah. Right? But this one has cutscenes. It gets you in there. They're there. Nothing special. I don't think any of the characters are standouts. I mean, I thought some of the characters are cool, like the father of one of the main female characters, but not anything that drew me in or anything like that.
Yeah, and I could kind of sum up my thoughts as if you've seen your average shonen sci-fi anime story, it's that with all the tropes and all that. If they were to push it a little farther, at least to match the way the world feels, then maybe, just maybe, they'd have something there. But for the most part, as it stands right now, because where you wrap up with the campaign ends on a to be continued, but even then, it could be better. Let's put it that way. It could be better, but I'm not expecting better. I'm not playing PSO2 for its narrative. If it makes me care about its narrative at some point, kudos to it. But what we really care about are things like the gameplay and the world design.
So the graphics and world design. So I kind of want to talk about the general graphics first and transition to the world. So generally, I think the character models look great. I think they did a lot with the character models from regular PSO.
Nice.
With all the different with all the different outfits and stuff, I think they did such a great job with the character models, and having them in the open world at every location. It looks great. All the updates to the system, I think, really bring the game to the next level. It's not like blow your mind, but it's good where it's playable and it's an enjoyable experience.
It definitely serves as a good base. I would say that. I feel like the more they go with New Genesis, because right now, like we kind of stated earlier, story's average. The world's pretty decent in this and other, but they built on and improved some things. I made a joke about the eyes for the player character and their expressions. They don't really have any, but everyone else, seems to emote pretty darn well. So the more they build, the more they really pile onto this. I can see this being really cool to look at in a back-to-back, in maybe a year if they really push for it. Which, considering that New Genesis exists at all, tells me that they're willing to put in the effort. Just, it's weird where they decide to put it sometimes.
Yeah, true. Well, let's take that and talk about regions, because regions the same issue is the same
Yes.
issue in my opinion. You got one, the Aero region. It has multiple maps, and they have slightly different feels to them, which were cool, right? But it's very similar, very samey.
Yeah.
But it's cool because you can get everywhere. It's seamless, right? You can go in the city and outside the city. You can see everything. You can get to any spot you want to get to on the map with all the beautiful movement we'll talk about later. Allows you to get everywhere, and there's no loading screens. Not much lag now. That's all I'm going to say on that. But except for when it's loading in character models, and I found that acceptable, but it's mostly seamless. And the only issue I had is it's not enough. It's just one region, and I understand they're building on it, but I don't think it's an acceptable level for 2021.
This is fair, and most of that probably falls into however the design philosophy is within PSO2 and how they're creating it. I don't know if they're actually looking at other competition and whatnot, or they just figure we're PSO2, we're pretty big, and people play us for us. But I also think that they should kind of look around and be like, okay, we're going to use some of you and use some of you, and it would get so much better. But speaking specifically to regions and how seamless the transitions are between one area and the other, honestly, I was kind of impressed with how well it handled it. Because I've played games where there will be at least some stutter when I'm going from one area to another. But no, once you load in, unless you're fast traveling, there is no loading screen for the most part. You're in there. And compared to base PSO2, that is a welcome change. And another thing that's a welcome change, honestly, is the gameplay, starting with the movement.
So movement's very great. There's no other way to say it. It's so good. You're able to easily reach locations, the gliding and the jumps. Yes.
Yep.
Yes. Have you played Warframe? Yes. It's great. And then they have these I call them jump pads in our script, but they're the little air things that take you up so you can go further and reach different heights in the game. This kind of helps you reach top of mountains and stuff. Awesome.
It can also be abused for combat.
True, can be abused and to run away. There's no negatives to the movement to me here. Wow.
I'm a little greedy, and I'm I want it to be faster, but that's mostly because of and we'll talk about more of this a little bit in a moment once we get to combat. But that's because in base PSO2, I played the bouncer class, and they have boosters on their boots, so I was always zipping around the linear maps in base PSO2 to get to places really quickly. So not having that here just makes it feel like everything's slower, but in general, things flow together really, really well. And honestly, despite the fact that I feel a little iffy about it, I could say the same about combat to an extent, if you want to take the lead on that before I get to how I feel about it.
Combat, I thought was very good. There are multiple classes, and they all have different class mechanics that make them feel unique, and I think that's important with any game, and not all MMO-like games are able to nail that, and I think they do a good job with it. You can dodge, and there's separate weapon actions that counter or do stuff like that are hard to execute. They're hard, and that makes it fun, right? That gives you another layer to the combat, which I really like versus just clicking one or two skills, because it does feel like there's not enough skills in some points, and there's not a lot of customizability in those skills. I also want to say that it is definitely fluid. You're going to hit, dodge, back. It reacts to every button press. It feels good, unlike some other games we played recently. So I really enjoyed the fluidity of the combat. My only downside, I would have to say, is that there is the number of skills that we've kind of talked about. But I do think it is definitely intricate enough to be successful.
And actually, for the most part, at the stage I'm at to now, we're essentially caught up with each other, I would say that I'd agree with that. At first, I had a problem with the combat due to the reasons that you said. There weren't enough skills. There wasn't enough to necessarily do in combat and whatnot. But once I got to the multi-weapon section where I was able to blend some of my skills, I was a gunner, I'm a gunner and what is that? Not Techer, Force. Gunner and Force. Those are the two classes I'm kind of juggling. Once I started mixing those up, it got more fun. Combat got more enjoyable. I think the problem I had was with some of the fights in the main campaign. It's here's a boss fight. He's essentially a bullet sponge, but he doesn't do a lot of interesting things. So I'm kind of just holding down X and then Y and then dodging occasionally. The dodging is fun, very responsive, but again, the fights themselves, unless I'm fighting multiple enemies at once, if it's just one big boss, it's not very interesting because they don't really they don't have a large move set to work with. Once you understand their pattern, it's kind of just it gets slow. It gets slow and it gets a little boring. And I can say that about other games. Final Fantasy is not immune to it. I tank in that game. It's just that there's a clear differentiation between the early points of a fight where it's like, okay, I understand what you're doing. Okay, cool. I'm getting bored. Oh, you're in rage mode. Okay, here we go. And then by then it's dead. In Phantasy Star, it doesn't feel that way as often. And I'm mostly thinking about the big dude with the sword. You know who I'm talking about? There's a cool mechanic with him where I think you burst the thing on his back and that limits his abilities or how much damage he can do or output or something like that. I'm not sure. It was just glowing and I'm like, that's the weak point. I'm going to shoot it. Giving me something to focus on in the middle of the fight is great. But then after that's broken, now I'm just essentially laying into it and dodging a lot. And that's I start getting a little bored with that. But once you start hitting me with multiple enemies and I feel like I have to manage a lot of things at once, then it starts getting good.
Agreed. And the multi-weapon system also helps, I think, when you get the ability to have two weapons in one class is very helpful.
Correct.
So let's talk a little bit about the content types in the game. I think that plays around in it because I think this is part of the issue. Story quests, which you have to do till you get to the Do Be Continued.
Yes.
PSE burst farming, which is like 90% of what you're going to do.
It's essential for leveling. It's not the only way necessarily, but it's the most efficient one.
Yeah, that and skill points, right? So,
yes.
Which I have on that list. Unlocking skill points is another piece of it, which are the towers. Either the towers or the cocoons. Those are two options there.
Yeah.
I actually think that's pretty cool. The Gigamex farming, which is new, but it was released before we talked about this video, so I wanted to mention it. But I think it's very similar to Urgent Quest, not very different.
Mm-hmm.
And Urgent Quest is that last piece of gameplay. So they have five different types of gameplay that I've recognized here. I do feel like, okay, story quest you get through pretty quickly. There's some cool boss fights that are replicated in within the other gameplay. PSE burst farming is, if you like the combat, fun. If you don't like the combat, it gets boring quickly.
It gets more fun if you're playing with more people, though, because by the time you were helping me and there were more people around, then it was more fun because things didn't feel as bullet spongy, and it actually felt more interesting.
Right.
Well, yeah, interesting. I'll say it.
Yeah, I agree. No, when you find like how to get the groups of 8, it makes a big difference. It's still just farming, though. There's not really a different type of content. So if you're not into that farming type of gameplay, you may not enjoy it, though it does keep you like moving back and forth to different areas, which is kind of cool.
Yeah.
And then you have the urgent quests are cool. I don't know if you had an opportunity to play them, but they're
not in New Genesis. No,
not in New Genesis. So it's just a big quest. You with a group of people and you ride through the event. Usually it's like you're just riding through a little area. You defeat a whole bunch of enemies, and then you get to the big boss, who's an enemy you've already fought normally, and you beat them. And it's a lot more challenging, a lot more health bar. I think that's super cool. Gigamex farming, I don't think either one of us have done. That's like the top level item where when it rains, it comes down. It's kind of cool, but it's not cool because you gotta wait for it to rain. I don't know.
That's weird.
I'm not a big fan of that, but it's really challenging, and you have to kill it really quickly. You only have a certain amount of time, so that's the mechanic there. I know you haven't played that, and then there's unlocking skill points, right? Which you've probably played a lot of that.
Yeah.
So that's the towers and the cocoons. They're cool. They're cool little bits of gameplay that last a short amount of time, and there's like little scores you get for completing these bonus objectives, but they don't mean anything.
Yeah, honestly, just kind of wrap up the tail end of this section. I feel like there could be more skill point towers, in my opinion, only because the what they did provide, you have different challenges per one, and you get rewarded with skill points, which help you increase your battle power. And I feel like if you had more of those, the grind wouldn't be as heavy. But of course, I don't know if they want that or not. If they actually want to help you that much, but I just feel like it'd be nice because where I left off, I ended up doing all of them to get to where I needed to get to the level I needed by the point that you're at in the story. So it's not even it's arguably not even optional.
Yeah, it's not optional.
Like you have to do all of them, not some of them, all of them. Unless you're really just going to grind it out like that, then by all means, I guess if you're patient. I'm not like that.
I agree with that. And then I just want to talk briefly about upgrading gear, because this can be either fun or frustrating. It's a confusing system. It is the exact same system as, well, I should say exact same, but similar to the original PSO 2, which is probably why they kept the system, so that other players will be familiar with it, or existing players will be familiar with it, because that's probably the biggest part of their base. So basically how it works, you grind gear by sacrificing other pieces of gear into it. So that's going to get you up to a certain level, and then you can pay some resources and some additional cash to get to the next tier, and you can grind it up again, so you get up to like plus 40. So that's like part 1, and then you have unlocking of fixes, which are these capsules that you can apply, and you have to farm those capsules. So it's a very in-game kind of system where you're really farming that piece. It takes a long time, a lot of hours to get the fixes and get the exact ones you want. So that's the fixing system. And then you have potentials where you just pay a plethora, that's the only word I can use in this case, for plethora of materials to unlock the potential of the weapon. I'm not against this being, it has a slightly complicated system, but it has a lot of options for you, which I think is good, right? You can really customize your stats and get a gameplay that you want. It's the same with the weapons you can find, right? The weapons all have different abilities. Like one that I found, I can dodge and I get critical attack for 30 seconds. Like, that's super cool, right?
Right.
So there's this upgrading system along with the weapons you get, I think, really complement each other. So it is strong. I just think it may be slightly too confusing and not explained well enough. It's better than PSO 2 original in the explanation, but it's not perfect. It could use more work because it's a complicated system.
And I'm going to keep my point here succinct for the sake of time and say that that's what gated me for a bit. Dion can speak to that if he really wants to. This blocked me off for a while, kind of pissed me off. I eventually had to accept that this is the system that we're presented with. And farming, let's put it this way, resources being in the world, that's fine. But I feel like you should be rewarded with them from general gameplay and combat as well more often too. You can't even get end grinders from combat often, at least. There might be a 0.2% chance you might. But from what I've seen online, nope, just green boxes. But you kind of need those if you're going to, boost the stats on your weapons. I just feel like that could flow a little better. That's just my opinion on that, though.
Agreed. Overall, I can say I think the game has promise. I think it's good. It's a good base. There's obviously some issues with it. If you're a PSO2 fan, you're going to love this game. If you're not a PSO2 fan, you may not become a PSO2 fan just from this base experience. You may need to wait a year to get the game some time to grow. And I think we can sum both of our experiences in the same way.
Essentially.
Unless you have something else.
No, that's essentially my point. If you don't mind grinding a lot, but if this game is not going to be a passive experience for you, you'll be fine. You'll enjoy yourself, especially if you have your people to play with. But otherwise, if you're looking for something that'll blow your mind or something for you to come to, if you're coming from WoW or Final Fantasy or or even Warframe, this ain't it. In my opinion, It's not it. Not a bad game, just average.
And I think it'll get better with time.
Yeah, it'll definitely get better with time. But I think I think that's all we've got for now. Thanks to all of you for stopping through to listen here on DuoQueue. If you think we might have glossed over something big or might need to expand on something, feel free to say so in the comments below. Also, don't forget to share and leave a like. And next time you're waiting for a party or searching for a lobby, feel free to tune in again while you wait.
See ya.
Fuck grinders.